Hi there, Adam here, and in this video I'm going to show you how to import your code components into Interplay using the Cosmos library by Auth0 as an example. Interplay needs two things to run your code: a UMD build of your components and a JSON config file that describes those components and their properties. You can generate these yourself, but it's usually easier to use our CLI tool. Before we start, we'll clone the repo and install the dependencies. And while that's installing, we'll have a look at the repo. You don't have to modify or rearrange your components. We just need an index file that tells the CLI where your components live in the repo. You can use an existing index file or create a new one that exports a few components to get started. In this case, we'll use their existing one here. After installing the CLI, we'll run Interplay init, which connects us to an Interplay project and creates a local settings file for the CLI. Click the button here for details about the CLI settings. We'll edit the settings file to tell the CLI which packages we want to import from the repo. For this repo, we'll import one package and we'll tell the CLI to use the index file as the entry points for both parsing and bundling. If you wanted to provide your own custom build, you can set it as the entry point here. So now we've set our entry points, we can run Interplay build, which creates the build of the components. Then we can parse the components with Interplay parse. This parses the source code of each component to generate the JSON config. For example, let's look at the alert component. Here it has an appearance property with some allowed values, and here are those allowed values in the generated config. Before we deploy to Interplay, we'll also use the parsing to generate some preset configurations for our components that we can use in our design tools. We can create these in Interplay, but in this case Cosmos already has some useful configurations in Storybook, so we'll add a setting to tell the CLI to generate presets from the Storybook files. And then we'll run the parsing again to update our JSON config file. Once that's finished, we'll deploy the build and the JSON config to Interplay. Follow the link to open our project, and here are our components in Interplay. Here's the alert component we looked at earlier with some generated presets. Now, if we look closely, we can see the font is not quite right, and checking the repo, we find it requires a global styles component called CSS baseline. That's already exported in our index, so we can go straight to the project settings and tell Interplay to include that component for Cosmos. If we needed to, we could also set a wrapper component for theming or CSS files to be included. So now let's check the alerts again, and the font is looking much better. We're happy with our changes, so we'll commit all our new config into the project, and Interplay generates navigation thumbnails for the presets we've added. On this first run, we've added all the components. If we run the import again, then only the changes would need to be committed here. This means we can check the CLI settings file into our repo and run the import as part of our CI process to keep Interplay up to date. If we want to, we can curate the config here in Interplay and publish this project as a design system, which means we can now use our React components in Figma via the Interplay plugin. Thanks for watching. You can find more details in our docs website, and we love to help, so please do let us know if you have any questions.